Tony Soprano, the man who played him, James Gandolfini, died suddenly today of a heart attack at age 51. Now, I happen to be a fan of The Sopranos. I've told you this for years. I think it's one of the finest TV shows ever made, not because I hero worship these characters. The writing, the acting is superb. The fact that they created a character, a mob boss, who secretly goes to a shrink was, of course, sheer brilliance. And, of course, they showed him within his New Jersey home with the wife, Carmela, and the two children, who people who watched The Sopranos saw the children grow up over the 10 years that the show was on the air, from little children to actual teenagers. And so they become, like I said, a life with father. In my day, it was life with Tony Soprano. So let's play a piece of James Gandolfini on the Savage Nation. Come on, let's...
If I was to know something possibly terror-related and help you out, could I bank the result in goodwill? Well, there were a couple of guys, I don't know, Arabs, Arabians maybe. They used to hang around the Bing, and somebody I knew may have did some business with. Like, the point is, they used to be around all the time, these two, drinking, and then suddenly they disappear. And I mean completely. And then a week or so ago, I'm driving, and I see him with these other guys, the headgear and the beard and the whole fundamental bit. But there's nothing illegal there, right?
So that's Tony when he's driving past the mosque in New Jersey, and he sees two guys who were doing some illicit work and hanging around his strip club. And this is in the heyday of when we were still fighting the Islamo-fascist enemy within our shores. This is before America got brainwashed into thinking the war on terror is over. There are no Islamo-fascists. Anyone who looks into Muslims is a racist, etc., and so on. So it was even written into The Sopranos. I got to ask you some questions. The number one question is, why do you think America is fascinated with gangsters and gangster movies from, let's say, the Godfather and the television show The Sopranos? You know, one of the finest books written on this was by Selwyn Rabb, called Five Families, The Rise, Decline, and Resurgence of America's Most Powerful Mafia Empires. It's a phenomenal book. It's almost 700, 800 pages long, 750 pages. If you want to get into the whole detail of it, fine. But the thing is, there's some interesting analogs inside here for our digital minds. And we can go into that if you want, or you can ignore it if you want. But I don't want to do just straight politics on a daily basis. It's done all day long. It's the summertime. We have a very dangerous, out-of-control megalomaniac in the White House pushing for nuclear arms controls in Berlin, pushing to arm the rebels in Syria. You know, I don't know whether this man is just simply stupid, misadvised by academic leftists who don't even know what the hell they're doing, or if it's something more sinister. At this point, I can't even determine what is the modus operandi of Barack Hussein Obama. But it's getting me very worried because each day it gets much, much worse. So if you care to talk about James Gandolfini dying today at age 51, what impact he may have had upon your life, he's a big cultural icon, by the way. Or the other godfather, Obama, in Europe giving a speech behind an 8-inch thick security wall. Or Google and Facebook spying on you with the help of the government, meaning that Google and Facebook appear to be, in essence, government entities. They never were a private enterprise. I mean, how else do you explain companies growing so quickly? They don't grow that quickly on their own. So there must have been, it's like the Beware the Government Media Complex, 1998, So those are the topics. 855-400-7282 is the phone number. I'll take your calls right now on the Savage Nation. Let's begin with Drew on WABC. Drew, what's your topic? Go ahead, please.
My topic is President Obama at the Berlin Wall, but can I make a quick comment on Gandolfini, however you say his name? He's, I'm half Italian. I studied acting, and I was into it, and I always thought, I would feel guilty if I played gangsters, but then the money, if I was offered that money. But I just want to say he leaves the earth by making a fortune portraying a negative stereotype of an ethnic group, where someone like you was a scientist and a talk show host. So what you did for humanity is so much better than what he did. I just wanted to say that.
Well, I understand that, but I still think that there's a great place in the world for actors. I think that actors take us away from our ordinary life. They take us out of ourselves. They make us reflect on our own lives. They give us some joy sometimes. I understand all of that. However, in the long run, the gangster roles can only have a negative impact on a society. You're never going to stop it because people are fascinated with bad guys. I mean, I'm on the side of the lawman, not the bad man. I respect the man who makes a pension at the end of his life instead of stealing it from pension funds. You know what I'm saying? So I know which side is right and I know which side is wrong. It doesn't stop me from watching the movies, but I don't glorify them. In fact, I don't go down that road. So I work hard for my living, and it doesn't, it didn't affect me. I never wanted to be a gangster. Let's put it to you that way, okay? But did you ever watch The Sopranos?
Oh, I watched it a few times, and it was an excellent show, like you said. And The Godfather is one of the best films, maybe the best film ever, the first two Godfather films. It could be the best films in history. And
but why do you think Americans particularly are fascinated, and it's not only Americans, fascinated by gangsters and gangster movies?
It's a good question. The two things that I thought of was that the people that are the gangsters could come from your family or from your neighborhood.
They have a familiarity. They're like someone in your own family. I analyzed this a long time ago, and I'll tell you my opinion on this in a short version, if you don't mind, and I'll do it while you're off the air. I don't want to keep you any longer. We live in a corrupt society. We all know the society is corrupt. We know that the law is corrupt. We know that judges can be corrupted. We know that there is no justice. You can win a lawsuit, and the gangsters that you won it against, whether they call themselves businessmen or gangsters, can then appeal it endlessly and keep you tied up in court. They can put webs around you. You'll never see a dime from them if they're really evil, and they can run churches, whatever. Okay, so we all understand that there's no justice in the world. And there's a part of us that, like in The Godfather, we all wish that we knew somebody like The Godfather who we could go to and say, Godfather, look, I'm an honest man, and this man stole money from me, and I took him to court and I won, and he won't pay me the money that he stole from me. He's still trying to wrap me up in tentacles, Godfather. Can you help me with this? And we hope that The Godfather is a just man, and The Godfather would say to us, well, I'll tell you something. You're a good man. Your daughter is a good woman. She runs the bakery down the street. I'll tell you what we'll do. You don't worry about it anymore. We'll collect on that debt. And we hope that everything is done, up and up, and he'll collect the debt and no one gets hurt. But that's not the real world. It doesn't work that way. We all hearken back to some primitive time, some tribal time in America, where there was no real central government, where there were basically tribes. And the tribal leader was who we went to for justice. And if the tribal leader wanted to remain a tribal leader for very long, he had to provide justice to the members of the tribe on a regular basis, or he would be, let us say, kicked out of his leadership role, and another leader would take his place, a younger, stronger man who would do the things for the people that needed to be done in his mind that were just. That's assuming that there was, a sense of justice that could ever be meted out or established in a tribal time. I can't overgeneralize this. But what I'm saying is we all wish that we knew a Godfather who was benign, who didn't hurt children, who didn't rob pension funds, who would do the right thing. He was sort of a roguish guy that we knew was a gangster, and he was courtly and nice to women. They don't exist. If they ever existed at all, which I doubt, they certainly don't exist anymore. Just ask the people who write about it who were once members of that club. The whole thing of the old school, there is no old school. The whole thing of being nice as a gangster doesn't exist anymore. All they do is hurt people and steal from people. But nevertheless, there's a degree of, how shall I say, certainly a degree of toughness about them. That's a given. And there's not a man on the planet who doesn't wish that he was tough enough to take on his worst enemies himself. But he isn't. Most of us are not tough enough to take on our worst enemies alone. So we have to hire lawyers. We have to rely upon a criminal system. But how many of you have had legal cases where you've imagined hurting the other party for what they've done to you? You've imagined really wreaking damage upon them and their family for their evil ways. Be honest with yourself, but you don't do it because you're an average person and a decent person. As someone once wrote, the difference between a sane and an insane person is not what you think, but what you do. I'll be right back.
Then it was hot in the car. It was stuffy. There's no air conditioning.
Your father's car.
With my wife driving, which if my father were alive, he would have stood for 2 seconds. The old guys were different. Men in the front, wives in the back.
You like that arrangement?
Actually, I think the wife should ride in a little cart behind the car, like in the cartoons. Like behind Noah's Ark, there's a little boat with the skunks.
Some of the writing is sarcastically funny in The Sopranos, and I still watch it to this day. It's one of my greatest relaxations, not because I worship the character. I admire the cop who retires on a pension, not those who rob pension funds. I just want to, keep the set and frame accurate here. But I also am able to watch entertainment without being unduly influenced by the characters. I wouldn't say that all children can do that, but nevertheless, forget the moralizing. We're talking about Tony Gandolfini. I merged the characters. James Gandolfini died today at age 51. For all of you Sopranos fans out there, and I don't know how many there are because HBO is a rather small outlet at the end of the day. I don't even think many of my listeners have ever watched it. I was rather enamored with the series and watched every one of them several times over the years. And to this day, I watch the replays from time to time. But I'm reminded of the fact that America admires gangsters. America can't get enough of gangster movies. America seems to glorify gangsters. And I'm asking, why is America fascinated with gangsters? Well, I can give you some answers, as I have. We've gone from the rule of law to the rule of coleslaw. We have a president who is functioning as though he is a gangster. Yes, I know you don't want to hear it. He answers to no one. There is no influence over him. He does what he wants. He dispenses billions and billions of dollars to his cronies as though it's his money. He sacks the treasury with impunity. He flies around the world with an air force behind him and an army. How do you differentiate him from a gangster? It's just a larger gang. The entire military is his gang. I mean, you want to really get crazy here. We have a president acting like a gangster right now. I've never seen it in my lifetime. Usually they're reined in when they get out of control. This one jumps from same-sex marriage to gun control to flood America with illegal aliens to cut our nukes to nothing. You name it, he's there. It's his agenda. King Obama. No checks, no balances. No democracy. No America anymore.
Savage Nation.
What was his last name? Razzo, what?
Grasso.
Grasso. You think it's a coincidence they sent him? If he wasn't Italian, he'd be back at the office sweeping up. The stupid jerk. They probably frisk him every night before he goes home.
Why?
Why? Because he's a vowel at the end of his name. That's why, Grasso. I mean, what's he think? He's going to make it to the top by arresting his own people?
Pastor Lucia,
He'll see. He'll learn.
we have a vow.
Effing right, and you'll be proud of it. Jesus Christ, you think there never was a Michelangelo, the way they treat people.
Did you know that an Italian invented the telephone?
Alexander Graham Bell was Italian?
You see? You see what I'm talking? Antonio Meucci invented the telephone, and he got robbed. Everybody knows that.
Who invented the mafia?
What?
La Cosa Nostra, who invented that?
Who cares?
Wasn't it Salvatore Lucana, better known as Charlie Lucky Luciano, who organized the 5 families? Lucchese, Gambino, Bonanno, Profaci.
Is there something you want to say to me?
I just like history, like you did.
AJ, did you know that John Cabot was Italian?
Whoa. Like he knows who that is.
It's the famous discoverer of Canada.
The Bank of America. You ever heard of it? One of the biggest banks in the world. Started by an Italian.
The first American saint was Italian, Mother Cabrini.
That's right.
Is it true that the Chinese invented spaghetti?
Now think about it. Why would people who eat with sticks invent something that you need a fork to eat? And here's something else I bet you didn't know. More Italians fought for this country in World War II than any other ethnic group. And I won't tell you about Sacco Vanzetti either.
The two Antichrists that got the electric chair in Massachusetts? Anarchists. Isn't it Antichrist?
There were 2 innocent men who got the chair because they were Italian.
How can there be 2 Antichrists? There was only one Christ.
So?
And of course, Francis Albert.
Anyway, again, we're playing snippets from James Gandolfini and other actors in the series of The Sopranos because I think he was one of the greatest actors. I've seen him in other movies. I'll tell you, he was also in a movie, Super 8, where he plays a sleazy pornographer. Astounding role. He had quite a great versatile range, incidentally, as an actor. And he died, of a massive heart attack today in Italy on a trip, age 51. And it's certainly a cultural discussion to have for those in America who are media watchers and movie watchers as I am. But, you know, the overlay between gangsters and gangster movies and gangster stories and our administration is becoming quite disturbing. The spying on people, the sacking of the treasury, the rewarding of cronies who do nothing for the society but steal the money. Very much like a gang, isn't it? Some would argue yes. Let's go to the callers. WMAL in Washington, D.C. Silvana, thanks for calling. What's your topic?
I think that we like gangster movies because the men in the family can have 1,000 mistresses and they'll still come home to their wife and they will never even think about divorce. They raise their own children. They love their children and their nieces and nephews, love them more than life itself. They know where their kids are at all times. They know who they hang out with. They know their boyfriends and girlfriends. They know who they marry. And they're very, very family-oriented, which is something that secretly all couples and families want to be, setting aside the mafia connections, of course.
So, but the fact of the matter is this real in the world of the gangster? That world is gone itself. That world that you projected is only real in some of the older movies. But it doesn't exist anymore, according to my reading of this subculture.
In Italian families, and I'm half Italian, half Puerto Rican, in Italian families, and my cousins that live in New York and New Jersey, who might be part of this subculture, it exists. It really does. It's very, very...
But how do you explain so many of the children of such great fathers becoming drug addicts, hating the family, not being part of the family? You know, there's been an awful lot of changes in the world of the old imagery. It doesn't exist anymore, according to what I read.
Yes, it is dysfunctional, but no family is one.
But, Silvana, what I'm saying is one of the reasons that The Sopranos was so popular is because here we saw a dysfunctional mafia family in New Jersey living in a split-level home. The father was secretly going to a psychiatrist because he had blackouts. He was blacking out. He didn't know why. He has children who, one becomes a student at Columbia and becomes a big liberal. The other one, the kid becomes a complete loser, worthless, can't get out of bed in the morning. So, you know, what were they trying to say with this series? The writing was beyond belief in terms of a contemporary view of such a family as opposed to the stick-in-the-mud stereotypical imagery of, the old ways, let's say the 40s, 50s, which by my reading doesn't exist anymore.
What I can say to everybody in Germany and everybody around the world is this applies very narrowly to leads that we have obtained on issues related to terrorism or proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So there are a few narrow categories.
He's in Germany trying to BS the Berliners, our president, our dear leader, and while he had 200,000 acolytes worshiping at his feet in 2008, there were only 5,000 this time, and he's trying to justify his unpopularity by saying that the NSA spying is very limited, it only applies to these cases and that, blah, blah, blah. No one believes him anymore. The only people who believe him are those in the media. Now, that leads into, in some ways, because many of us think he's an illegitimate leader acting like a gangster, in the sense that there are no checks and balances upon his spending, his outrageous control over every aspect of our lives. We are talking about the death today of the Sopranos character, Tony Soprano character, James Gandolfini, who died today at age 51 on a trip to Italy. Now, I'm a big fan of The Sopranos. I thought it was excellent writing. In terms of production values, I've never seen anything quite as well done. I enjoy it. I watch it. I laugh at it. Do I glorify the gangster life? Absolutely not. I lead the opposite life. But the fact of the matter is we're talking about why gangster movies, in particular, are popular in America and in the world. And people are calling about that. And you're invited to call about that at 855-407-2882. But I want to broaden it slightly. Here's a study, a news article, just came out a minute ago. A new study comes out, says that 70% of Americans are on prescription drugs. Let me repeat that. 70% of Americans are on prescription drugs. Antibiotics, antidepressants, and painkiller opioids are the most common prescriptions given to Americans. 20% of U.S. patients were found to be on 5 or more prescription medications. Amongst women, you're not going to believe this, ages 50 to 64, 1 in 4 are on an antidepressant. 13% of the overall population on antidepressants. 17% of people were being prescribed antibiotics. 13% are on pain-killing opioids. What is the relationship to organized crime? Well, it's quite clear to me that there's a blurring between drug dealers, drug peddlers, and prescription drug peddlers. There's a huge, huge similarity in the mind of many between the peddling of drugs in the streets and peddling of drugs in doctors' offices. Okay? So where does crime end and where does crime begin is the question. Who's the bigger criminal? The guy on the street or the guy running the drug company? Prescribing, let us say, psychoactive drugs for children as young as 2 years of age. Who's the bigger criminal? The guy who sells crack in the street or the guy who sells and ADHD drugs to children as young as a year and a half? Or the doctor who whores himself out and starts to say that babies need drugs when they don't need drugs? I'm talking about for behavior disorders that may not even exist. Who's the bigger drug dealer? The doctor who gives paper after paper after paper saying that, yes, ADD exists. Yes, ADHD exists. Yes, it's prevalent in our society. Yes, the children need to be drugged. Is he an honest man? Well, there are psychiatrists who would say, no, he's a criminal. Even the psychiatric profession has turned on them.
Green Grove is a retirement community, and it's more like a hotel at Captain Teeves.
Who's he?
Captain owns luxury hotels or something. I don't know. That's not the point. The point is, I talked to Mrs. DiCaprio over there, and she says she's got a corner suite available with a woods view. It's available now, but it's going to go fast.
Of course it's available. Somebody died.
You got to stop. You got to stop with this black poison cloud all the time, because I can't take it anymore.
Oh, poor you.
You know, I got problems at work. I got problems at home. I got a friend who's been diagnosed with cancer. Most parents would be grateful if their yuppie children put as much thought into this as I did.
I'm not going to that place.
Then I will go to court and I will get a durable power of attorney over you and I will place you there.
You're listening to James Gandolfini playing Tony Soprano fighting with his mother character about putting her in a home. And I tell you, there's another thing about it. You watch the series over a 10-year period. The kids were babies when it started or young. And then as time went on, they were teenagers with all the problems of teenagers. And the mother, goes to the home and then the mother dies. It was just at a time in my life when my mother went into a care facility, and strangely enough, there was some parallels between his childhood, not the criminal side, but the family side, and my childhood. In many, many ways, I don't know if I was alone in that, but I surely related to him and the mother. Boy, was that something. Anyway, Gandolfini died today at age 51. Great actor, born in '61 in New Jersey. He went to Rutgers. He was a bouncer in Manhattan and a nightclub manager. In the 80s, he went to a Meisner Technique acting class. Went on to Broadway, and he played little roles like Gina Davis's plumber boyfriend in Angie. I remember the movie Crimson Tide. He played a loyal Navy lieutenant in Crimson Tide. He played the enforcer in Get Shorty, and then he played the mobster in True Romance. He wound up, having it at The Sopranos, 6-year run. He won 3 straight Screen Actors Guild Awards besides Emmys for lead drama actor, and he's making $1 million an episode, which was at that time unheard of. And as I said to you many times, the priest said, God could put the lights out at any time. Okay? So that's all. He was bigger than life. And we're talking about why gangster movies are so popular and the gangster figure in America. If you want to call, go ahead.
The other night, I was riding in a Cadillac like my father used to have. Carmela was driving. I was in the back passenger seat. Sitting next to me was Gloria. In front of me, sitting next to Carmela, was a business associate of mine. I don't know where we were going. No place. We never seemed to get anywhere. Kind of like this therapy.
Kind of like this therapy. That's the James Gandolfini, Tony Soprano character. talking to his therapist, and he's always complaining to her that the therapy's not doing him any good because he has panic attacks, he blacks out. In other words, we all came to empathize with the character in many ways because he was vulnerable. In other words, he was real. He was not a stereotype in that sense. But the bigger question today for me on the talk radio show, which I don't want to waste your time, and I think it's a sociological question is worth discussing, is, I mean, these movies make a lot of money. Sopranos make a lot of money. Why is America fascinated with gangsters? Why? And at the same time, we're looking at our president, and they're saying his trip to Europe was a complete disaster. It says, with vague pledges and backtalk from Merkel and Putin, President Obama shows how far America's standing with Europe has fallen. No kidding. They say President Obama's honeymoon with the world is over. What was it exactly about Obama's controversy-marred trip to Germany and the G8 summit in Northern Ireland that fell so flat? They write, how about everything? And, okay, there it is. The news is pretty bad for him, and you'd like to say it's pretty good for America. It isn't. Because I want my president to be admired. I want my president to succeed. I want my president to knock heads in Europe. I want my president to tell the world where they can take a hike. But I don't have that in him. I have an apologist and a liar, in my estimation, who's taken this country down so many notches, I don't know what it's going to take to bring us back up, especially when I don't see one Republican who can bring us out of the hole we're in. I see one, but I don't think he can win. That's Alan West. I'd like to see him defeat Rubio and become a senator. Alan West is my idea. I'd like to see war heroes, guys who fought in Iraq, guys who fought in Afghanistan, run for office across America. Then we could save the country. Anyway, let's go back to this topic. Let's go to Steve on WABC. Steve, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. Up until about 10 years ago, I lived in a bit of an idealistic world. I thought, like you, the mob was a bunch of murder and thieves, and my government was there to protect me against that. Quite frankly, Michael, today I don't see much of a difference except for two, all right? I'm not saying the government has people murdered, but I think we can agree, due to their incompetence, people are getting killed, first point.
Well, they use drones to kill people, and in killing their targeted enemy, they kill innocent people.
Wait, our troops in Afghanistan are basically sitting ducks. I think you would agree, right?
They're being killed every day because of the weakness of the leadership. They're getting whacked by Afghan troops, shot in the back. Who puts up with this?
You made my...
Who raises his son and wants to be a hero, and the boy goes over there, gets shot in the back. If he does his job, he gets court-martialed.
Right. My second point is, all right, the mob, and this builds on what an earlier caller said, if you don't bother them, they will not bother you, okay?
Well, is that true? Is that really true?
Yes, that is true, and I've seen that, okay? If you don't get in the way of their business, and it's not hard to avoid it really isn't, okay? You stay away from their business and don't get involved with them, they will leave you alone. My government wants to be involved in my life, whether I agree with who's in
or not. You make a very good point. Huh? As to whether the government kills people domestically, there was a case a day ago of a left-wing reporter who brought down General McChrystal through his articles in Rolling Stone. He died in a car wreck in Los Angeles the other night at 4:30 in the morning. Would you say that was an accident?
This is news to me. I was not aware of that. No,
well, our people are writing on the internet. Was it an accident? There was a talk. Andrew Breitbart had a heart attack in his 40s after a drink in L.A. A day before he was going to make a big announcement. Okay, he was a walking heart attack, the lifestyle he led, the food he ate, the drink. So, in my opinion, who knows what happened there? You can't dwell on these things because you have no answer. I don't know the answer to the question. That's all. Now let's go to Chicago. Gino, thank you for holding. You're on the program. Give us your opinion. Thank you.
Yes, Mike. Most people can relate with the wise guy genre because it reflects values and standards that many wish they had. Respect, honor, love of family, marriage between a man and woman, love of country. I don't think it's the murder and violence people admire, but it's the alpha male that many men wish they can be. And let me give an example.
Well, no, hold it. That's a lot to absorb. You are right. In other words, you're saying that the people watch the gangster movie not so much for the gore and the murder, but for the almost positive attributes of the characters.
Exactly. The alpha male element of it. Let's look at Lucky Luciano. 26 years old, redefines the mafia. Al Capone, 29 years old, running a $30 million a year business. Nowadays, kids are still smoking pot, living with their mothers at that age. Now, I'm not condoning this lifestyle, Mike, but in many ways, it's a necessary evil. And anyone who watches...
Well, you could argue that vice has been with mankind from the beginning, and they're just fulfilling a societal need. I mean, you could put it that way. But then there's the argument, why not legalize all the vices and charge taxes on them?
Well, Mike... Anyone
then you have then everyone gets what they want, and society doesn't have to have the gangsters to worry about. They have the government as gangster.
Well, I fear the government more than I fear the mafia. And I'll say this much, Mike. Anyone who's watched The Sopranos, Anthony Soprano, by all means, is a conservative. If anyone who's watched that, his values, his love of...
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. It's reflected in many of his... Many of the dialogues in the Sopranos were about terrorism in the early 2000s. Remember
Yes.
Al Qaeda? He's always worried about the Arabs he's doing business with. You know who they are. Are they really just business guys and gangsters, or are they really Al Qaeda? You know, that came up in many of the early Sopranos, and he worked with the FBI, as a matter of fact, mirroring what Luciano did in World War II. In one of the series, it was written that way, that he actually is approached by the FBI to help them. If they see something with the, the terrorist types, to let them know. And they'll give him information that might help him. Remember that one?
Yes, I do. Your caller, Tom, it was maybe like an hour ago, he made me cringe because I'm not condoning the mafia, but when I hear Italian people bash organized crime in the sense of, they're stealing from the public, they're taking 10% kickbacks. Let me tell you something. If you're in the city, you have a business, okay? It's not such a bad idea to have a Tony Soprano in your corner if you need your garbage picked up, if you have people bothering you, if you have certain things happening. The mafia, to me, is not as bad as the government that is putting drones over our heads.
Yeah, well, let me quote someone who knows a lot more about it than I do, and that's a man named Selwyn Raab, R-A-A-B, Five Families, The Rise, Decline, and Resurgence of America's Most Powerful Mafia Families. I'll quote him because he says the mafia wreaked unparalleled damage to America's social fabric and vital business enterprises, from Wall Street to the construction industry. Almost every American alive today has been injured by the mob's insatiable greed and invisible influence. It was a mafia game plan that introduced the scourge of heroin into inner cities, provoking an epidemic of violent crime and the ruination of once stable neighborhoods. He writes all of this. It was mob strategy that corrupted major labor unions, damaging the lives of thousands of honest workers. And through rig contracts, he writes, inflating the cost of homes, offices, garbage removal, clothing, food, and other basic products. And the book is interesting. It's 800 pages long. He investigated and he wrote it. So you draw your own conclusions. I'll take your calls on the Savage Nation. The main topic to me is, why is America fascinated by gangsters? And it's not just America. Look at France. Look at the French movies from the 50s onward. Some of the great gangster movies. Look at the English gangster. You want to talk about gangster movies? One of the great, I think some of the best, if you want to talk about the genre from an entertainment point of view, are the English gangster movies. I think that the most frightening of all gangster movies ever made is Gangster #1, an English production. I forget the actor. He was tall, blonde guy. It was so awful. But yet I was fascinated by this, the rise of this guy, and this from the early years to the late years. Malcolm McDowell plays the part. Phenomenal. Unbelievable. And how can you not, want to be watching a movie if you like the genre with a Cockney gangster? Some of them were amazing characters, and again, fascinating to those who like the genre. And apparently there are many who do.